Hey all, this is Reddit Oscar. On this channel we've been doing daily spoiler-free videos until the release of Elden Ring's DLC. Yesterday the embargo on reviews was lifted and I watched through a lot of them. So I'd like to relay some of the information I got from those reviews, while also filtering out spoilers. First of all, one of the things that people universally agreed on is that Miyazaki is a filthy liar in describing the playable area as the size of Limgrave. Reviewers described the exact amount differently, but they all agreed it was much bigger than advertised. Some said it was the size of half of the playable map in the base game. In a tweet, Vati said it was like 5 Limgraves on top of each other. As for how long it takes to get through it, there were a few different answers. Some said it was 40 hours, but Fextra had it at around 120 hours, and there was Dom's Roundtable that put 200 hours into the DLC. Now for me personally, I was more interested in what the time frame would be like if I was given the time to leisurely wander around and find everything. In my initial playthrough of Elden Ring, it took me around 250 hours to complete, because I was determined to find all the caves and all of the secrets, and I was playing blind. So I find it encouraging that there were people that took over 100 hours to get through this DLC. That seems closer to the number I'll be getting to myself. Now as for the quality, almost all the reviewers are saying that it's excellent. More than excellent, in fact, there were many people that said that this is the best DLC, not just a FromSoftware DLC, mind you, just the best DLC made. On Metacritic it has a 95 score. Most of the scores give it really high marks. The only one that's a little different is Eurogamer that gave it a 3 out of 5, citing its difficulty as the reason for its unexpectedly low score. And it really seems to be very difficult. It's something that's emphasized in almost all the reviews, and multiple people cited one of the bosses as being much harder than Melania. And it might not be optional, it might be the last boss that they're referring to. That part wasn't totally clear to me. What I found notable is that it wasn't just the more casual players complaining about difficulty. There were plenty of those, but there were even people like Scott Yund, which I know is a talented PvP guy, that knows how to make a build, and in his video he was emphasizing the extreme difficulty of the last boss. According to him, it took him 160 attempts, and at attempt 125, he gave up trying to solo it and decided to use the Mimic tier to help, and even then it still took him another 35 tries before he got it. And it required intelligent use of the Mimic tier, apparently. And he expresses surprise that they expected the reviewers to beat this thing, and he's certain that it'll get nerfed at some point. This sounds very interesting. I'm very excited to finally get into the DLC and experience this difficulty for myself. Alright, that's all the information I have from the reviews. On an unrelated topic, I want to talk about some more Miyazaki interviews that came out recently. This one is from GameStop. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but there are some interesting comments that Miyazaki has about difficulty that I want to talk about. The interviewer says, "Each new release from the studio is a chance for it to evolve, but usually what we hear is FromSoftware is the team that makes hard games. What is your interpretation of your identity now, and how do you see FromSoftware?" Miyazaki responds, "It would be hard to describe the next chapter of FromSoftware in one word, but if I had to, I think it would come down to value and how we create this value. The words that you use to describe it, fantasy world setting, difficulty, sense of achievement, that perhaps I think is more closely tied to my own set of values than the company itself. These new directors and game designers that are up and coming are in-house talent, may not share those exact values. I don't want to say something right now and commit to the future direction of FromSoftware and bind what we're able to do. But if you look at it more broadly, I think it all comes down to creating and providing that value to gamers and being able to do that at 100%. So making sure the environment is conducive to that type of thinking, and creating a path to be able to achieve that is to me what I think as the president and how I feel about the future of the company. So in reality, it's a very simple company, I would say. For the immediate future, I think how fans have responded to our games, and I dare say the amount of trust they've placed in us as a brand, has provided us with this opportunity to be able to show different types of value that we can add. So I think our job at this point is to not betray that trust and expectation. On an individual level, however, the sense of overcoming challenges and the dark fantasy world setting is something I will always have, but I don't necessarily think that that will always be the direction of the company, because others might feel differently." Now this is a very interesting answer. He's saying that the difficulty that FromSoftware has been known for is more of an individual thing for him, and that he doesn't want to bind people to that philosophy. So going forward, as these new and up-and-coming directors start directing their own games, they may not share Miyazaki's philosophy and will not be obligated to make hard games as a rule. And this is corroborated by statements he said in the past where he's not going to supervise other directors, they're going to be free to do their own things. Later on in the interview, he says the following. On the one hand, I often direct multiple games or oversee multiple games at once, so that difficulty curve and sense of achievement are always going to be a core of my game direction and game design. But with another game, perhaps, and this is going to happen sometime in the future, that I'll be able to talk about in more detail, there might be different themes or core elements. So, he seems to be explicitly saying that his games are always going to be hard, that's his thing, and it's unlikely that he'll change that. But it's not a company thing, and in fact, he seems to be implying that there's something in the works that is of that nature. Something that doesn't necessarily focus on difficulty, but has a different core element. Something that he'll be able to talk about in the future in more detail. Which I find very interesting and reinforces my belief that FromSoftware is going to see a notable shift in the future. We're going to get a lot more from them, and a lot more variety from them than we've been used to. Now finally, I want to talk about one last interview quote from Miyazaki, where he references his own games that he works on. He says, "Back when doing interviews about Elden Ring, I think I mentioned that I'm still in the process of making my ideal fantasy RPG. And while Elden Ring is not quite it, it's pretty close. It's getting close." The interviewer, intrigued, then asks what is his ideal RPG. And Miyazaki says, "It's hard to say without giving spoilers for my next idea or our next games. But I think one thing that's not necessarily missing but makes it difficult to achieve my ideal is that when I play, I know everything that's going to happen. I already know everything that's going on. So in terms of enjoying the game from a player's perspective, I'd love to not know that, and for someone else to make my ideal fantasy game. Please, if possible. Then I can just enjoy it as a player." And that is just so funny. Miyazaki is chasing an ideal that he can't enjoy himself. He's like Moses. He leads people to the promised land he can't enter. The interviewer suggested maybe a self-induced amnesia. Miyazaki responds, "That be the dream. To self-induce amnesia and enjoy the games I created myself. But I might get really angry and break the controller or something. Maybe it's not a good idea." Now, as funny as all that is, his answer also contains some information because he says that it's hard to talk about what his ideal game would look like without giving spoilers for his next game or next idea, implying that not only these new directors are working on stuff, he's got stuff in the works as well. One of the reasons that I'm excited for Shadow of the Erdtree to come out is so that I can begin eagerly waiting for FromSoftware's next thing. I'm tired of waiting for Shadow of the Erdtree. I want to pine over something new. And that's the end of this video. As always, thank you very much for watching.